In 2023, F1 deleted Nick de Vries after 10 races and forgot about him so fast it was almost impressive. Then he went home and won another World Championship. Now, I wish that was a normal ending to this story. It is not. Since 2022, this sport has deleted 10 drivers. Daniel Ricciardo is on a farm in Australia. Sergio Perez got handed a bill for his own therapy session. Valteri Bottas spent a year as someone else's backup plan. Mick Schumacher has been waiting for a phone call for 4 years. And 6 others you probably stopped thinking about the moment their replacement was announced. Today, I'm going to tell you exactly where all of them went and where future deleted drivers like Max and Lewis will go, because there are only 4 places a deleted F1 driver can end up. And by the end of this video, one of your current favorite drivers is going to be staring down the barrel of at least one of them. You are welcome. Now let's start with the ones F1 accidentally did a favor. The first destination is the one F1 will never admit exists. It is a category where getting fired from the sport was genuinely the best thing that could have happened to a driver, and nobody on this list represents that better than Nick de Vries. Cast your mind back to 2023. De Vries got handed an AlphaTauri seat mid-season after impressing as a substitute driver. He already won the Formula E World Championship. He had been a Formula 2 champion. He was a proper racing driver with proper credentials. And then F1 absolutely destroyed him. 10 races and a handful of points. He was replaced mid-season by Daniel Ricciardo, while the paddock collectively shrugged and said, "Yeah, that tracks." The whole experience was so humiliating that De Vries basically disappeared from the public eye for several months afterwards. The sport deleted him so completely that most F1 fans forgot he existed within about 3 weeks of him leaving. And then, quietly, he went back to endurance racing, back to Toyota, back to the WEC when nobody was timing his sector gaps against a teammate who was quietly becoming one of the best drivers on earth. And then in June 2026, Nick de Vries won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, starting 14th on the grid, against factory BMW, factory Cadillac, and the sister Toyota that looked faster for most of the night. He won by 11 seconds after 24 hours of racing, and on the podium, soaking wet and barely able to speak, he said, "There were so many times we felt like we had no chance. It proves you should never give up." The man Formula 1 ate alive and spat out, went and won one of the oldest, most prestigious motorsport events on the planet, starting from the back of the field, against the odds, in a car nobody picked as the favorite. F1 thought it was ending his career. It was actually just redirecting it towards something better, and I genuinely love that for him. Kevin Magnussen's version of the story is different. Less dramatic, yes, but in some ways more revealing about what F1 actually does to the people inside. After 9 seasons in Formula 1 across McLaren, Renault, and 2 separate stints at Haas, they knew what he was when he left. Not a front runner, not a champion, but a proper racer who loved racing more than he loved the politics. He landed at BMW Motorsport as a factory driver in WEC and IMSA before his final Abu Dhabi GP had even finished, which honestly is the most Kevin Magnussen thing imaginable. Already sorted before the last race was done. His father, Jan, is a 5-time IMSA champion. Kevin grew up at these races as a kid, and when I asked what sports car racing felt like compared to F1, he said it was more pure, and that the people love what they are doing more than they do in F1 because in Formula 1 it is so competitive it can be cold in a way. Cold. He used the word cold to describe a sport he raced in for 10 years. That alone should tell you everything you need to know about what it feels like on the inside. Oh, and he also made his NASCAR Cup Series debut in June 2026 because apparently 9 seasons of F1 and multiple WEC campaigns was not quite enough racing for this man. Kevin Magnussen is 49 jobs at once, and I respect every single one of them. Nobody can accuse Kevin Magnussen of being a man that does retirements. He does relocation. Those are the lucky ones. The drivers F1 accidentally pointed in a better direction, but they are the exception. For most deleted drivers, the story does not end with a World Championship or a NASCAR debut. It ends in a room nobody talks about. And that room has a name. The waiting room. The waiting room is the biggest category, and it is the one the sport never talks about, because acknowledging it would mean admitting how many drivers it chews up and leaves in a very specific kind of limbo. The waiting room is occupied by ghost drivers. These are the drivers who never technically left Formula One. They are still in the paddock every single race weekend. They are still wearing fireproof underwear and carrying helmets and going to engineering debriefs. They attend press events, they post paddock photos, they answer questions about the development role, but they are not racing. They are close enough to smell the fuel and far enough away that nobody is reading the telemetry. Formula One has given them a title and a pass and a dex, and in return, they exist in a suspended state that is neither a career nor a retirement. It is simply purgatory, but with better catering. Valteri Bottas spent all of 2015 in the waiting room at Mercedes after Sauber dropped him at the end of 2024. 10 wins, 20 pole positions, 67 podiums across 12 seasons of Formula One, and his job title was reserve driver, which honestly is a sports polite way of saying you are here in case someone gets sick. He turned down an IndyCar offer saying he was concerned about adapting to an entirely new category after 12 years in Formula One. But some people are saying he only turned down that IndyCar offer to do it because he was convinced a race seat would come up. And to be fair to him, one did, Cadillac in 2026. But spending a full season as the backup plan for George Russell and Kimi Antonelli after 12 years as a race driver is the kind of character act that would break most people. Bottas called returning to Mercedes like coming back home. And I'm not entirely sure that was a compliment. Bottas at least had 12 years of wins and podiums to fall back on. Jack Doohan had 7 starts. Jack Doohan lasted 6 races at Alpine in 2025 before Flavio Briatore looked at his performance, looked at Franco Colapinto waiting in the wings, and made a decision that Esteban Ocon publicly called not normal. Doohan is now Haas's reserve driver, working alongside the same Esteban Ocon who defended his Sargeant. He's 23 years old, he has started 7 Formula One Grand Prix, and his entire job right now is to be ready in case someone at Haas catches a cold. The waiting room took him in immediately because at least there, the paddock can keep an eye on him. And he is not alone in there. Zhou Guanyu spent all of 2025 running Ferrari's simulator after Sauber dropped him at the end of 2024. China's first ever Formula One driver, reduced to driving a virtual car in a basement in Maranello so Ferrari's engineers could test setup ideas. He is now Cadillac's reserve driver, reunited with his former teammate Bottas and his own personal manager Logan, who is now Cadillac's team principal. This man's entire career has looped back to the same 3 people in a different room. Formula One gave him a historic debut and a simulator seats and called it support. But at least, Zhou and Doohan got there recently. Mick Schumacher has been waiting since 2022. Mick Schumacher spent 4 years in the waiting room after the end of 2022. 4 years of reserve duties, WC appearances, simulator works, and paddock passes that say everything except race driver. He tested cars for Mercedes, Alpine, and McLaren. He raced in the WEC for Alpine. He was considered for the Williams seats that went to Colapinto. He was discussed for the Sauber seats that went to Bortoleto. Williams team boss James Vowles said, and I'm quoting directly here, that Mick is a competent driver and would have done a good job. He didn't say special. He said good and competent. Wow. Just wow. That is the kindest possible way to say, we chose someone else. And sadly, Mr. Mick has been hearing versions of that sentence for 4 years straight. And then he did something none of the other ghost drivers did. He stopped waiting. In 2025, Schumacher signed a full-time IndyCar drive with Rahel Letterman Lanigan Racing, packed up whatever was left of his paddock pass, and went to America to race. And that paid off because he was named Indianapolis 500 Rookie of the Year in 2026. The waiting room did not release him. He just got up and walked out, which honestly anyone on this list has managed. The rest of the ghost drivers are still in there. Mick at least figured out where the door was. And the reason the waiting room keeps filling up is not random. It is a pattern and it is getting worse. The waiting room does not have a checkout time. You stay until someone calls you or until you finally admit to yourself that nobody is calling. Doohan and Zhou Guanyu have not made that admission yet. And honestly, good for them. But the waiting room is getting more crowded every year because the spot is creating more residents faster than it is producing exits for them. This is actually the pattern nobody is talking about. In 2024, mid-season firings were relatively unusual. In 2025 alone, Liam Lawson was dropped by Red Bull after just 2 races. Jack Doohan was dropped by Alpine after 6. In 2026, Esteban Ocon has scored 3 points against his rookie teammates' 18. And Brazilian and French media are already reporting that his relationship with team principal Ayuo Komatsu has hit a breaking point. The sport is accelerating its disposal of drivers, and every accelerated firing creates another waiting room resident, and the waiting room is already full. Which makes what happened next genuinely remarkable because 2 of the drivers we just talked about got out. Not because the sport opened the door for them, but because an entirely new team showed up and built one. Here is a structural observation that nobody has made explicitly, and it is important, I promise you. 2 of the drivers on this list, Sergio Perez and Valteri Bottas, only got back onto the Formula 1 grid because an 11th team arrived. Cadillac. General Motors, the American manufacturer that spent years trying to get into F1 and finally made it for 2026. Without that expansion, Perez and Bottas were almost certainly done. The grid had no room for them. No team was offering them a race set. The sport had finished with them. And of the 2, nobody needed Cadillac more than Sergio Perez. Perez's exit from Red Bull was particularly brutal. He had signed a 2-year contract extension in June 2024. By December 2024, he was terminated. He had scored 9 points across his final 8 race weekends. He had gone 19 consecutive attempts without a podium, and Red Bull paid him reportedly around $20 million to go away. Which sounds like a lot of money until you realize the only reason they paid it was because the alternative was keeping him next to Verstappen for another 2 seasons. And watching that slow motion disaster continue. What Perez said about those final months at Red Bull is genuinely extraordinary. He said he was billed £6,000 by the team for a single psychology session they arranged. £6,000 for 1 therapy appointment. And his response was to tell them, and I quote, "Send it to Helmut Marko. He will pay it." I cannot decide if that is the funniest thing I have ever heard or the most depressing. But honestly, I am leaning towards both simultaneously. He also said the environment was such that if he was faster than Max, it created tension. And if he was slower than Max, it created tension. So everything was a problem. That is not a team, but a controlled atmosphere built around one man's needs, and Perez was just trying to breathe inside it for 4 years. Now I know some Max fans will attempt to murder me in the comment section for saying this, but come on guys, take a breather and try to see where I'm coming from. Moving on. Mr. Perez took several months off. He kept watching races. He kept waking up at 6 in the morning for qualifying sessions even though he wasn't in them. And then Cadillac came along and he took the seat and he said the quiet parts out loud at his signing. I couldn't afford to leave Formula 1 the way I left Formula 1. Checo Perez did not want a new chapter. He wanted to rewrite the ending and Cadillac gave him that. But here's what nobody is saying about all of this. The broader point here is that Cadillac saved 2 careers that the existing grid had structurally excluded. The sport produced drivers faster than it produced space for them. It needed a new team to absorb the overflow. This only happens once in a generation if we're being honest. The next batch of deleted drivers will not have a Cadillac waiting for them, and that is a problem the sport is not interested in solving. Well, at least Perez and Bottas got a lifeboat. The drivers in the final category did not even get that. These are the ones who are actually gone. Daniel Ricciardo's exit from Formula 1 was spread across 3 years and 2 firings and 1 broken hand. And by the end of it, the sport had taken so much out of him that retirement felt less like a choice and more like a relief. He said it himself. In reflection, I was grateful that they made the decision for me. I think it would have been hard to be like, I'm done. 8 race wins, 32 podiums, 257 stats, and a dashingly handsome face. His career peaked at Red Bull after 2014 to 2018, and then spent the next 6 years declining in increasingly painful slow motion, including a stint at McLaren where he simply could not match Lando Norris's pace, which led directly to his replacement by Oscar Piastri, and the beginning of the end. He came back to Red Bull junior team in a reserve capacity, impressed at a test at Silverstone, got back onto the grid with AlphaTauri in 2023, broke his hand almost immediately in Zandvoort, came back from the injury, underperformed in 2024 and was replaced by Liam Lawson after the Singapore Grand Prix. On the last lap of his last race, he set the fastest lap of the race. But of course he did, because the man always had timing. Then he spent months on his farm in Australia, grew his hair, grew a beard, went dirt biking in Queensland and ended up in a hospital with minor injury because even in retirement, Daniel Ricciardo cannot fully escape the consequences of going too fast. He attended the 2025 Australian Grand Prix in disguise, incognito, because he wanted to be there but did not want the circus. He ran karting events for kids under his own name, and then in September 2025, he was announced as Global Ambassador for Ford Racing, and he said in an open letter, "While my racing days are behind me, my love for anything with wheels will always remain high." But the detail that actually closed the door was the number, race number 3. Ricciardo has held that number since 2014, his entire racebook career. His entire love of Dale Earnhardt and NASCAR and the emotion attached to that specific digit. Drivers will leave F1 keep their race number reserved for 2 seasons in case they come back. Ricciardo's number 3 was protected until the end of 2026. And in December 2025, Max Verstappen announced he would be adopting the number 3 on his car with Ricciardo's blessing. Ricciardo gave away the number he had held for 10 years to the man who had indirectly made his Red Bull seat untenable in the first place. If there was ever a symbolic moment of a driver accepting that the chapter of their life is finished, that was it. The number 3 is Verstappen's now, and Ricciardo is on a farm growing his hair and watching people drive Raptors. That is at least a story with an ending. Logan Sargeant does not have one yet. Speaking about Logan Sargeant, this 24-year-old does not yet know what his story is. He was dropped by Williams mid-season in 2024, replaced by Franco Colapinto. The best finish of his career was 10th at the 2023 US Grand Prix. He tried to sign with the team for the European Le Mans Series in 2025 and then withdrew before the season started without explaining why, saying only that he wanted to pursue other interests. He has since signed with a management company targeting a sports car career. He is 24 years old and racing in LMP2 at Indianapolis and Road Atlanta while trying to figure out what pursuing other interests actually means when the only interest you have ever had is going as fast as possible in a single-seater. The full delete does not always come with a clean ending. Sometimes it comes with a lot of silence and a management deal and some Instagram posts that don't quite tell you where someone is going. Logan Sargeant is 24 years old and Formula 1 used him up before he even knew what he was. That is the full delete. There is no dramatic exit and no symbolic number handover. There is just a quiet door closing on a career that never really got to start. 4 categories, 10 drivers, and sadly, the sport keeps making more. So here is where we land. 10 deleted drivers, 4 destinations. Some of them found something better. Some of them are still in the waiting room hoping for a call. Some of them got rescued by a lottery nobody knew was coming. And some of them are just gone, or going, or somewhere in between. And here's the thing about all of this that nobody at Formula One wants you to think too hard about. The mid-season firings are accelerating. The waiting room is more crowded than it has ever been. The lifeboat only comes once a generation, and the sport is still producing more deleted drivers every single year without doing a single thing to change the system that creates them. And right now, as you watch this, the system is already working on its next one. Esteban Ocon still has a seat at Haas for now. He has 3 championship points in 2026, but Oliver Biermann, his rookie teammate, has 18. His team principal has told the media publicly that nobody is satisfied with his performance. His contract expires at the end of this year, being 2026. Right now, as you watch this video, Ocon is standing in the doorway of one of these 4 categories, and he does not yet know which one he is about to work into. And neither do I, and neither does he. So tell me in the comments, which category do you think Ocon lands in at the end of the day? And if Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton gets deleted from Formula One tomorrow, which category will they land in? While you are thinking about it, go watch whatever video is sitting on your screen right now, because the algorithm has a better read on deleted drivers than the F1 paddock does.